have you always been entrepreneurial?
Yes. The long short, I know people have this constant debate of, are people born an entrepreneur? Can you grow into it? Can you develop it? I think you definitely can. But I've always been super entrepreneurial. So my grandfather was a Greek Cypriot. He came to the UK with nothing, and then he started building out businesses, actually in casinos. So then that side of my family and my dad, they've always been very like big risk takers. We've always like worked for ourselves, and I genuinely believe that I've got that in my blood. So I love taking a risk. I love sort of trying to push the boundaries.
Is that something that you saw then from a very young age,
yeah.
all around you?
Yeah, super young. So where it started with me is I was doing, 13, 14, go and get my first job. So at the point probably where you want to start taking girls out on dates, there's only one solution. So I'd go out and work and do gardening and wash cars, anything I could do to try to get some money. At the same time, I started just watching YouTube videos, learning about Alibaba, things like that. So I started working long days or long weeks, and I'd probably earn, I don't know, £100, £200 a week. But then I figured out, well, this video says that if I buy this item or this electronics, I used to buy electric headphones and sell them in school. I could buy this headphone for £10 and sell it at 40 quid. That's £30. That's the same as me working a whole day doing whatever I was doing. So I quickly learnt this, like, well, you can create value in something just by sourcing something and selling it. So I started going on that journey of, okay, I don't just have to sort of sell my time. I can start trying to invest into things and buying. So I learned that from a really, really young age. Went on then a journey of millions of different startups. Vintage clothing was a good one. There was something called ASOS Marketplace. Do you ever remember that?
Yeah.
So ASOS was doing incredible things as a business. They launched their marketplace where you could sell. So I was wholesaling in probably at the age of 14, 15. Headphones, I got all the headphones I bought and sold at school broke, so I got in a lot of trouble there. Had to refund everyone. So then pivoted into vintage clothing. But you're buying clothing by the like 10 kilo bags and stuff, and the stuff stunk. So I had to pay my mum a bit of money to like wash it through the washing machine, but then I would sell it on Marketplace because it was the time. So how many years? This is 13 years ago, when vintage clothing was probably selling for more than brand new stuff or whatever. There was this, I was selling varsity jackets was a big one. So then I scaled that to like, not big numbers, but big for a 14-year-old. I was probably selling a couple £100 a day. So what, £6,000 a month?
Seriously?
Yeah.
As a, well, you're
14, 15,
no
I
way.
reckon. Yeah.
All cash in your pocket as well.
Yeah. There wasn't 100% profit margin, but good margins on it. Yeah. So from there, just kept going effectively.
Blimey. Do you think that anybody can be an entrepreneur? If they put their mind to it?
Underground thing of what I see in people who succeed, it is grit, and it is the willingness to keep going, and just like quitting where quitting isn't really an option. If you have that mindset, then I think you definitely can. But I say to people now, particularly people my age who have been entrepreneurial for a while, if I knew what I knew on the journey I've been on, you'd almost be reluctant to start, because you have a lot of big setbacks. You have a lot of really challenging times. You have times where you're super high and times like the highs are high, the lows are low. But I think you have to make sure you're not putting that taking that naivety around people when they start. When I started, you think, oh, everything's going to be swimmingly and go great, and you think I can set up any business and scale it. But you soon learn that it is probably a lot more challenging. But I think whenever I'm helping out someone who is a young entrepreneur, I always just encourage them just to keep going and fail fast. Like, I think some lessons you have to learn yourself.
And you don't make any progress unless you're making mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So, and I've used this phrase on the podcast a number of times, but speaking with a founder, with an angel investor once, and he was reluctant to invest into someone's business because it was their first business. He was like, I don't want your first mistake to be with my money.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting way of looking at it. Like you almost have to fail in order to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
But I guess actually you almost need to be in a position where failing is an option, like is a luxury. If some people fail,
It's everything.
It's everything, and it's all gone, and they have to go back and start. I don't know, people say, oh, if this business doesn't work, I can go back to doing my job. What would happen? How do you see that? What would you do if your business went to zero?
Yeah, no, I've always framed things quite differently in my head. And I think the way I think is, when I explain it to people, is definitely different to how probably the normal people do. Like with the failure thing, again, I've always been a young age, I got into reading on entrepreneurships, and you read that, like, I don't know, the average person has 6 failed businesses before their 7th success, or whatever the statistics say. My gut reaction at that age was, right, I just need to get 6 failures out of the way. So, like, I didn't really care. People tell me it doesn't work. It's like, I don't care. Like, as long as I learn a lesson, and every business I had which failed, I have learned a lesson from. So then that was that. And then after I went to university, went into a corporate job, and I remember wanting to leave after 6 months. And I remember just asking my boss. My boss loved me. I was really good at the job, worked super hard. And I said, look, I'm going to leave because I wanted to start a business venture. If it doesn't work I'm going to give it a go for 6 months. If not, can I come back? They said, yes. And I went and went, result, like a risk-free bet. I had money saved. I was making more money outside of the job than in the job. So I thought this is going to be fine. But then everyone would say, everyone was saying to me, it's such a big risk leaving. Like, are you sure you want to leave this corporate job? And I couldn't get my head around it because my boss has said they'll have me back. Yeah. Like, there's no risk here.
I got 6 months off to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just I've always framed things in that sort of light and definitely not thought of it. I think there's a Jeff Bezos quote, which is that people massively overestimate risk and underestimate the upside of things. And I think that definitely is, particularly in the UK, we're very cautious.
What does he say? If there's a 10% chance of it being successful, he'll take it every time.
Yeah,
which a lot of people would. Yeah,
hitting a home run. Yeah, effectively, you only need to hit one home run and you're okay.
So you speak there about sort of that 6 months off. Well, your current business, which is D Louise, started during a period which was when we were all sat at home doing nothing and was effectively given the time and the freedom. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so it was an interesting period. I had left my corporate job probably like 2018. I had a business called LS Personal Shopper. We were basically selling designer clothes to predominantly footballers and high net worth. Just before COVID, I thought, right, I'm either going to open up a shop to sell all the stuff from. It was the time where the reselling of trainers was going crazy. It was a really great business. The market which just kept going up and up and up. It started really because when I was younger, after the vintage clothing, I got into reselling trainers. So I'd do camping out outside Oxford Street, Nike Town. I'd do all of that multiple times. Got really into it. But effectively, I was like, right, I'm going to open a shop or I'm going to open a showroom. So I ended up going with a showroom, opened up a showroom near Cobham in Surrey, which is an area where a lot of footballers live in. It was sort of like this private showroom. COVID then comes in. My rent was, I don't know, felt like a lot of money at the time. Kitted out the showroom, but fortunately it worked in my favour because we just transitioned the business to online. Everyone had furlough money. People wanted more and more designer clothes. Like the average person who'd never been able to afford it now could buy a £500 pair of trainers because they couldn't go out and spend. So I've really opened up the market, scaled that business really quite fast. And then I would be at the office. It was just me and, I don't know, 5-6 other 22, 23-year-olds who worked for me. Would just make good money and play PlayStation and hang around with footballers who were coming to our warehouse, even when they weren't meant to. I would then go home and was basically not doing any work, be insane. Like I'd be home at like 9 p.m. Where have you been? You know, overthinking. I cooked you dinner. And we just have this this went on for months. So then I was like, right, this needs to end. I then floated the idea of like, right, she just really wanted to leave her job. I said, fine, leave your job, but we've got to start a business. You've got to start a business. You need something to do or some way to earn money. Facebook ads was just absolutely booming at the time. She said, oh, what about jewellery? She'd always loved jewellery. She would always, I'd always bought her jewellery. It's not talked about as much, but my grandfather was a jeweler and my uncle are jewelers, so they're more like precious metal stuff. But I was brought up around jewelry. I knew the industry relatively well, so I said, right, we'll go with jewelry. And then I said, right, I'll fund the business. But she was basically saying, right, can I leave my job? And I said, right, the same thing as what happened to me. I said, I'll pay your salary for the first 6 months. She wasn't earning a lot of money, but I said, I'll match your salary. I'll put a bit of money in to buy some inventory and stuff, but we've got to go all in. And she quit her job the next day. So one thing with Liv is she does have, she's got balls. Like she'll go for it.
She's all or nothing.
Yeah. She's an all or nothing. She's not scared to take risk. So that's probably why we work together. So she stuck to her word, handed in a notice, and then sort of started from there.
And then just went all in at that point. And was it her originally like leading the business?
Yeah. So it was we went all in from that point. I think she quit her job and we hadn't even thought of the name or anything like that. We then just decided to go into the stainless steel market. She identified that, but it was probably at the point I remember I was sat on the sofa in where we used to live in Putney, and she was just cooking some food, or it was in the evening, and we talking about names. She'd spent the day, I'd been at the office again, come back. She spent the day writing out names, and she said, well, we could call it D Louise after her mum. I'm thinking, look, that sounds really good, but also if we do call it this, like, this is no longer like a little side thing. Like, I'm not going to let it fail. Like, family for me is a massive personal value. So I'm not going to, this is like funding Liv's little side project has now turned into, right, I've got to fucking go for this. So from that point, I definitely did get more involved, and I was still running it on the side, and then fortunately product market fit, and we had a few good years before we started to like really try go for it.
When was that moment when you realised like this is a serious business right now?
It was November 2023. So the business was doing like okay numbers at the time, nothing crazy, a few £1 million, but then we had a really big Black Friday. Relative to what the business was, so say 10x a normal month, and it wasn't planned. We just did probably put 50% off site wide and sent a few emails. It wasn't anything like strategic, but then it was at the point where I thought, right, this could really be something. There's some real something here. The problem with my previous business was it was supply side constrained. So effectively, we might want a certain Hermes handbag or a Chanel handbag for a footballer around Valentine's Day. I might have 10 customers, but there might only be 5 handbags in the UK or Europe or whatever. So it was hard to scale the business beyond a level, and the business was very resolved around me. So I knew my next sort of like vehicle I wanted to get involved with was something where I could really try push it quite far, because I just wanted to try grow something a bit bigger. So then sort of at that point where I thought, right, we're onto something here. Let's give it a good go. From the January, I thought, right, I need to take this more seriously. I employed someone from my previous business who used to work at Gymshark.
Oh,
at
nice.
the time, Gymshark, Gymshark just got their £1.5 billion valuation, doing all these incredible things. And I was just that, I still am that person. I'll pester people, ask them a million questions. If I'm not scared to ask myself, like, how do you do this? How did they do that? When you were at Gymshark, what do you do there? How do you do, like, a million questions?
Just out of interest, was this Gymshark person, was that somebody who worked there, or was this the investor?
He worked there.
Okay.
But I just kept pestering him. Then one day I was driving on the motorway. He called me and he said, look, the ex-CEO of Gymshark, Steve, he said he was an amazing guy. He's left there. He's a chairs the board, but he started up a consultancy company. You should apply. You keep asking me so many questions. Why don't you ask him some? So Steve had set up a consulting company for small, medium-sized businesses. I remember on the form it said, are you turning over 10 million? We weren't. We're turning probably 4 at the time. And I said, no, but we will be soon. Like, I think I said yes, just to make sure, like, but let's just cross that bridge when we get there. Had an initial call and then paid for sort of like a one-to-one, a session with him and his team where we sort of told the story, told where we are. He questioned us on our numbers, and we definitely didn't know them well enough and all of those things. But I was like, right, I need someone who's been and done this before if I'm going to really start taking this seriously. And then from there, we built just a really strong relationship with him. He loved the brand. He loved the brand story. So he decided to get involved sort of maybe 6 months post that.
Can I ask how much he charged you for that initial consultation?
Yeah, you can. The initial was it was a good amount of money for whatever we had. I can't remember the exact number, a few £1,000 or a good amount of money, but it all went to charity.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah.
Were you reluctant at any point? Like, was it, that's quite a big number to pay? Or were you just like this?
No, I'm really not scared to invest in. I probably spend probably close to £50,000 to £100,000 just on mentorship still now.
Do you?
Yeah. So I'll just say to someone, if I think they know what, can I pay you £500, £1,000 for an hour of your time? I do that all the time.
Wow.
So just, I probably with Steve, I thought, you've got to, when you're in front of someone, you can usually get more out of them, or it's very rare that you're really let down by someone. He's been the CEO of Gymshark. He's got to know something. But he did know a huge amount. But yeah, I think a lot of people would have gone, oh, that's too much, or this or that. I'm not scared to roll the dice.
I've had Noel Mack, who's now the chief brand officer, on the show.
He's doing an incredible job.
Yeah. He's like number 2, I think, alongside Ben. Did you realise when you started speaking to him that you and him had a very similar mindset, or did you see him as someone that you've got a lot to learn from?
Yeah, a lot to learn from. We're definitely very different. I'm hugely that entrepreneurial, like a hustler. I like to make money. I don't think I was necessarily a very good businessman and leader. And I knew that sort of you go on that transition, and I'm still far on it, and I'm definitely better entrepreneur than I am leader probably. But I'd always known how to buy this and sell it for that, and then right, we should do this, and all these little hacks and tricks, and well, we need to get into this retailer. Well, find out where they live, and then we'll put some billboards outside their house, or do whatever we need to do. I'm very good at that. I'm less good at probably the more holistic, strategic, like where are we trying to go, the alignment of your team, the alignment of your vision. He taught us a huge amount with that, and I think it just started, from the point where it's like, okay, this is real. Like we should start taking this a bit more, not seriously. We took it very seriously, but less of like an entrepreneurial like highs and lows, and more like maybe we should budget where we're trying to go for the next 3 years and try go on that growth curve. And I actually do, like, contrary to probably a lot of what people say, I think you need to really keep that entrepreneurialism in you and in the business. That I have probably got to the point maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago, where I was too rigid, and you start thinking, well, this is the plan, this is all we're going to do, and we're going to execute against that. I think you need to keep that sort of like entrepreneurial flair within companies, and you have to be willing to be almost like a speedboat compared to, say, a bigger business, which is more of a cruise ship. So it's a balance for all those things. But no, it was obviously, it felt like a risk giving away, or Steve had some equity in the business. That did feel like a risk, but definitely the right decision, without a doubt.
Was that quite a natural conversation as well? Or was it like almost like the Dragon's Den situation that you see?
No, it was a funny one.
Go and stick to the wall.
So soon after, we had a few sessions with him, added loads of value, really, really helped us. Super excited after every session, buzzing. But I was thinking, why is he doing this? Because the fees were substantial, but not enough, not like huge. And I knew he'd obviously done well. Steve did well out of the Gymshark deal. So I knew, right, there's something going on here. Soon figured out after like 1 or 2 sessions that, okay, maybe the model is more, he can look into businesses and see where he wants to put his money. And I figured that out.
Smart guy.
Yeah, well, like, it's relatively obvious once you knew. And then I said to Liv before one of the sessions, I said, I think he's going to ask to invest in this next meeting. And she went, what? He doesn't like, because he just invested into a few other brands way bigger than us, like powerhouses. And I said, I think he's going to ask. I said, so what are we going to say? And Liv was like, yes, yeah. And I was like, well, what do you say? So you want him to be invested? And she went, yeah, of course I do. I said, okay, so what do you say to someone who really wants something? How do you make them want it even more? And then she was like, I don't know. I was like, well, you tell them no. So then lo and behold, she was like, we can't do that. Lo and behold, at the end of this 3rd, 4th, 5th session, whatever it was, he was like, look, guys, I know you don't, like, business fortunately was profitable, but I feel like we could add value, blah, blah, blah. Gave a bit of a sales pitch that I'd love to put some of my own money in and try grow this with you. And I just went, Steve, like, I'm really sorry, but like, thanks, but no thanks. In the knowing that it would just get him going. So we sort of left that with like, oh, we've got him where we want him. And then,
does he know this now?
No, I don't think he does. Then lo and behold, like, I think we continued working, and then we said, oh, we're willing to revisit it based on more our terms. So fortunately we came to some sort of agreement, which was super fair. But I think, like, Steve, I know he's super successful, but he's the first person I've met in business of his caliber who doesn't his intentions are very pure. Like, he's not looking to, he's the opposite of a shark. You always think in business, my mindset always before was, well, what are they trying to get out of this? Like, why are they doing this for themselves? Hand on heart, he's not doing it. I've worked with him for 2-3 years. He's not doing it for himself at all. He's the most selfless person, very extremely charitable, gives, writes checks consistently. I think any proceeds from D Louise won't be lining his pocket. He doesn't care about the return in that sense. He just cares about being involved with brands he cares about, which is hats off to him.
Do you think that he actually sees people? He saw you two,
people,
and he was like, I really want to support these people and help them take this to the next level. Because we've had this conversation about entrepreneurship in the UK, for example, and I don't think there are enough people that are doing this, championing people. There's often this tall poppy syndrome in the UK where when they get too big, we want to cut them down. What we need more of, people like that go, there are some people here who have got something and I want to be their champion. And if it means investing into them, giving them my time, I want to do that. Do you think there was an element of that?
It's exactly that. And it was the first experience. It changed me, who I am as a person, because I've always been probably not even scared to admit, but I think your honest thing as a businessman is like, well, what can maybe if I can do this, I can make this money and then can do that. and you start thinking, it becomes a lot more transactional. It becomes a lot more what can I get out of this? He doesn't view things in that way. So then you start thinking like, fucking hell, he's just a really good bloke. Maybe I should be more like that. So he definitely has taught me a huge amount just in how to hold yourself. He's got a huge amount of integrity. So yeah, probably learned just as much about how you should probably act and behave in life as opposed to just in business.
Has that shaped like the way that you view leadership now as well? Because we spoke before, you've got a team of people. What were you doing before him versus after him? Like, have you noticed a change in the way that you manage people, or like the way that you just go about your day to day in the context of the business?
Yeah. First of all, I think I've like probably out of any person who you can see it, like he is a leader. Like he's incredible. Like I wouldn't even want to try compare myself to him in any way, shape or form. I don't think maybe I could get there one day, but everything feels like when he's got a real natural aura of just like people align with the vision. A huge amount of simplicity he applies to things and gets everyone on board. My natural leadership is like, guys, I've had this best fucking idea ever. Scrap everything we've said. Like we're going after this, and then that will change next week. So I think I've learned to be a more deliberate, but equally, I think you should play into who you are. There's a great book called The Outsiders, which just talks about different types of leaders and people who've built businesses.
Yeah, fantastic. There's like 5 or 7 guys in there that have built effectively unicorn businesses. You've never heard of them.
Exactly, you've never heard of them, and you assume that people have massive levels of charisma and less massive levels, and I don't think that's always true. So I think you can lead in certain different ways, but I think the biggest asset I've always had is just finding people who I feel like are clear of where we're trying to get to. It's definitely going to be messy. It's definitely going to be scrappy, but I think what Gymshark had is it's very hard to look at them and compare. Like we're not looking at D Louise like we're Meta and we're going on this crazy journey. I think Gymshark and brands like that, a huge amount of his timing, a huge amount of his skill, having the right people in the right ship at the right time. I think most trajectories are far different to that. So I think people sometimes making sure the people you bring on board are aware of that and maybe realistic that not everything is just going to be this huge growth curve and success like a few of the names out there. You
said there about like you've got these ideas and you want to sort of run with them. Have there ever been any like ideas, campaigns that you have been like, this is going to smash it, and you've tried it and it hasn't? Yeah,
bundles. The way I try view risk is similar to what we said, is just try understand what is the financial return, or what is the total upside we can try get out of it, and then what is what we need to put in. So I've got a great mentor, someone I've worked with for a while, and a quote he tells me, which I constantly relate to the team, is that every decision is a business decision, in the sense that you're either deciding to allocate time, resource, capital. It's like, so what is the return on that time, resource, or capital? And I think when you're sometimes you can come up with they're great ideas in practicality and they could be super disruptive, but how does that actually lead to some form of ROI? I don't think ROI necessarily needs to be like, right, we want this amount of pound in our bank account, but what are we actually doing this for? I think previously, sort of early in my entrepreneurial journey, you just sort of like, that's a great idea, let's go. And you're not actually thinking maybe deliberately about the time it might take to do it. Can you put it off? By doing this, what are you having to say no to? But yeah, we've done loads of stuff. I think Steve, again, something taught from him, which helped me and might help some of the viewers, is that within your budget, or if you're building out a budget, is just allocate, say, a couple % of whatever your turnover is, just to test and learn. So that could just be some real like risk. Like it's hard to measure the ROI. It might be a pop-up or some sort of event, and that's exactly why we're going to do it. And then just be willing to that this might go nowhere. It might be opening up a new channel, opening up a new market, but allocates 2% of whatever your turnover is, or higher if you fancy it, if you've got the room to, and just go at it and just see what happens. But have a real like test and learn experimental mindset. Definitely helps.
But you do that with a relatively small portion of your revenues or your profits.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Of your revenue is how we try to look at it.
Okay. So I'm an investor, so we look at diversification. Like you don't want all your eggs in one basket, et cetera, et cetera. But you're playing a similar game, which is with our business, with our capital, your capital allocators, right? Yeah, so it's exactly. Like, how are we going to spend this pound in the most efficient way, but also there has to be a budget, which is for our higher risk stuff, which is we have to take a risk, a gamble, etc. on something, because otherwise you're going to follow the average path, right? And if you don't do this and try and disrupt, then you're just going to gravitate towards probably what the competition are doing, and you can't afford to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think it's just being sort of deliberate. Maybe in my past it was more when you were young, you just crazy ideas and you're executing it, and that definitely works. I'd keep going at that. But maybe being more deliberate of the tests of like, right, our hypothesis is if we don't spend £10,000 on Meta and then we spend £10,000 on product, which we gift to this audience across a new market, we think that this will happen. Then you can obviously run that for however long it takes and try and measure the performance. And then if something does work, normally that's where you see that crazy growth does happen in businesses. Gymshark did influencer before it was influencer, or a lot of brands built Huel was Huel because they were incredible at paid, they were incredible at Meta before anyone else was sort of doing subscription drinks online. So people catch these wins almost before they're early, and then it takes a few years for the market to catch up.
I'm actually wearing a Huel top underneath.
I really
because they used to just chuck out, like, if you're a Huel subscriber, they'll chuck in a free t-shirt.
So they were brilliant at that.
And a guy came in earlier on to look at the studio, and he was like, because it was warm in it, and I had my top off, my jumper off, and he was like, "Oh, are you sponsored by Huel?" And I was like, "I'm not.
Yeah,
it's just a t-shirt." But what a great example of of just giving away something for free. Are there any things that you have done that have had unexpected or like huge ROIs?
Yeah, our growth at D Louise has actually been pretty consistent. In all honesty, I think we've built a really solid business, but I think one constraint we have is I'm probably a lot more act more cautiously with the business than what I would like because of the meaning behind it. So I'd love to take probably more risk and really take more gambles and more bets, but because the business has that sentimental value, like we have no plans on, just like trying to, I know the risks you can take in business. I have no plans that I really want to try build something which is really solid. Jewelry is a category as well, because you're not based off a logo. It's harder to base off a brand that someone could be a meter away from me and I can't tell where their earrings are from. So it's hard to get that sort of like hockey stick growth like you might be able to if you're in fashion, where a logo becomes popular, suddenly everyone wears it. But obviously fashion comes up and then it comes down. Jewelry is definitely more consistent. So I think the category means that we're just targeting trying to be more consistent with our growth and just trying to compound it. It's a bit more of an S&P 500 as opposed to a crazy AI stock, which I find difficult at times, but it's the right thing to do with the business. So we're quite conservative about how we run it.
Are you actually thinking about new product lines? Are you actually sort of consciously thinking about, because it's jewellery and we can't stamp our brand onto it and therefore it's not visible to everybody, I'm guessing therefore you've got to spend more money on advertising to get it into people's vision. Are you then looking at what products can we design where we can put our brand on this? Yeah,
exactly. So the transition the business has gone into is sort of like why we've lived more front facing, why we've hopefully elevated the brand in the eyes of the consumer, is that when we first started, we could effectively just go to the customer and go, here's a piece of waterproof jewelry, buy it. And it was minimal design. It was, say, a rope chain, very easy to produce, very easy to get your hands on. As naturally, obviously, what happens in a market when something starts working, low barriers to entry, a lot more entrants. We knew that we had to start brand building we had to elevate the perception of the business, and we did have better quality of product compared to the market. So we would invest better into quality, but also into packaging, into the customer service, into the experience. But then we knew we had to try elevate our design. So we've probably spent the last sort of 2 years really trying to elevate our design and the products we have, and we've done it the team's done an incredible job at doing that. So we've seen that come on the journey. Obviously, what comes with that is that the higher cost of goods and your operating expenses come more in terms of you have to start spending more on design. And then you have to create demand for a design, or you have to try catch a trend. So we're balancing a few things there.
Where are the majority of your customers based at the moment? Are they British? Are they overseas? Are they mostly coming from online? I'm guessing they're primarily online, right?
Yeah. So we've sort of been... the business has been D2C first up until, it still is D2C first business. Our main market is the UK. It's sort of like we feel like we understand the customer best here. We understand, if we were going to work with influencers, we can really try build the brand in that way. We've built up some demand, but yeah, it's been been ecom first. When I think about, say, if we're going to try take it to the extremes of, the businesses of the size of the Pandoras, the Swarovskis are sort of in this elevated, it's like elevated costume jewelry effectively. They get there through physical retail. So the natural 80% of jewelry is bought in person. So people want to see the earrings are hard because people want to know the weight. Necklaces, they want to know, can I layer this with my grandma's necklace which she gave me? And rings is a nightmare with size. So most jewelry is bought in person. So we're rather unique when just the way we launched. But we're definitely going to just try to dominate the market here first through just being stocked, being more readily available. I had a mentor who worked at Swarovski, very senior there from a few years ago, and he always said build demand before distribution. So we've hopefully built up a bit of demand in the market, which we can now capture through distribution.
I'm loving this idea that you've got all these mentors that but we when we had the call to, introduce ourselves beforehand, we spoke about a post I saw online where Daniel Priestley was in the room with you guys, but he is obviously great at this sort of thing, particularly building demand beforehand. How does it feel being in the room around these people? Because I read their books or listen to their podcast to get information from them, but you're in a room with them, just chatting to them. Like, are you learning from them? Are you like learning by osmosis from these people all the time?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I'm huge into just the energy people have and people give out, and I think that definitely has helped me probably get into a few rooms. I'm definitely not scared to ask questions and ask for favors. So I think Steve actually has a quote which is he's a Geordie, and it's shy barns getting out, which is basically if you're shy and you don't ask, you'll never get anything.
Interesting.
So definitely not scared to ask. But yeah, being around those people, even that was a breakfast or a dinner at Richard Harpin's house, and again, like you said, he's done so much for British entrepreneurship. He's one of them where he's not doing this out to try probably make more money and just be financially return. It feels like he's really trying to give to British entrepreneurship, which is incredible to see. But no, the easiest way I think there's a few lessons in business which you need to learn on your own, and they're very hard to teach. Same with life, but there's definitely a huge obstacles. I always think that we're not, D Louise isn't an AI startup. What we're trying to do has been done before multiple times across different categories. So we can definitely take some lessons and try to make our rocky journey slightly smoother.
Yeah, of course. But it's also, it's great to be able to just pull on these people for advice. Like I said, I'm a person, the reason why I've got a podcast is because I'm a podcast listener, devour podcasts. So, and Daniel Priestley, I've been reading his books since, I don't know, for 15 years or whatever, when he first wrote The Key Person of Influence. But then to just be around someone like that, and like you said, like the aura they might have, the way that they communicate, to ask them questions and understand how they think, because you don't necessarily get that from listening to a podcast or reading a book, which is I guess invaluable as well. But how do you feel about being in those rooms? Were there elements of it to begin with where you were like, I don't belong in this room, or have you always just been like,
I know imposter syndrome is something a lot of people have struggled with. Weirdly enough, I never actually have. I don't overthink things. I think too much. I've got maybe quite quite simplistic. But I know it's definitely a real privilege, and I think that I've learned over the time that a huge amount of we talked about this previously, but I think a huge amount of entrepreneurship and a huge amount of business success isn't necessarily always tied to, you can't correlate who's got the most money with who's maybe the smartest. And I'm not saying that these people aren't the smartest, they're far further ahead than me and most people. But sometimes I've learned such valuable lessons from people who you probably wouldn't expect it, even if it's that, I love meeting young entrepreneurs and they're teaching me about what they are doing on Pinterest ads or TikTok. And it's like, you can definitely learn pieces from everyone. I think sometimes when you work with, it's amazing to learn a real top level strategy lessons from these people, or real top level, they're very clear thinkers, but the real nitty gritty, which we're still involved with, maybe you need to learn from someone else. So definitely a privilege to meet so many amazing people like that, but I don't treat them or feel like in any different way to say someone else.
That's so interesting. And effectively you're viewing it as you can learn something from everybody.
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Are you also someone that is very generous with your time if people come to you and say, I've been struggling? Because you're clearly a very, very entrepreneurial and very good thinker as well. Do people come to you and ask for advice? And do you sort of try and give them some sort of bits of wisdom as well?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. It happened at the start of last year. So I did my sort of like end of year. What do I want to, this is end of 2024. What do I really want to try do in 2025? What would make the end of 25 and I'll feel proud of? And I thought one area I need to, I give money to, like, I mean, I'm relatively charitable, a lot more charitable than say the average person, but I thought I need to do more. So I thought, right, I'm going to start by trying to mentor people or really help with mentorship. So I put myself forward. I'm dyslexic, so I thought I'd put myself forward to a few charities and say, look, I'm all ears, like happy to mentor people throughout this year if they want to start businesses, if they want advice, like you've got my time. So I carved out some time in my diary, and it was, say this is end of January by this point, had a stressful week, but I knew Friday afternoon I've got this. I kept my diary free. I had 4 mentorship calls booked and 3 didn't show. And the 4th was like a guy who didn't really look like he cared and wanted to be there. So that's where I was like, right, this probably isn't the best approach. I did go on and help a few people through that. I didn't just pull my back. But I think the main thing for me is I'm more than happy to give time and energy to people who I feel like over the like going the other way. Like I know if I wanted to, I've done it before. Like if I want to meet someone, like I'll fly and come meet you. Like I'll be wherever you need me to be. I'll come and do that. It's not on. I don't expect you to come to me, and I don't expect you to be on your hands. I'll pay for your time, whatever. Let's get it done. So I'm definitely happy to give sort of energy into people who I feel like maybe potentially will listen and use it. But it's I think that's part of it, is that some people maybe potentially just expect time and expect these things when it's not that simple. Time is the most valuable resource.
Yeah, of course.
It was quite funny. I found it hilarious. but nice gesture fell back on me.
But you've come at this from you're the other end of the spectrum, right? Which is the first thing you said is about work ethic. You invest money into mentorship. You're giving up your time.
Yeah.
And people just don't show up. And maybe there's a lesson there. One of the guests I had on, she said that whenever she does something, she never does it for free. She makes people pay something, because psychologically you've paid for something, you're more likely to show up. Whereas if you're doing it for free, then people are just a bit flaky.
Agree.
But I can imagine, again, from sitting in this room with you and listening to you, that if you had a call with a potential mentor scheduled, you would have turned up for it.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Yeah. I'm very like that, definitely that chaotic in the huge entrepreneurialism. But yeah, I think time is the most valuable asset. It doesn't matter how much money you have. If you speak to anyone who's got a huge net worth and you say, all right, would you trade all of your net worth for 20 years back? They'll all say yes. And if they don't, they probably love money too much.
Yeah.
So I think it's the most valuable asset you have. So yeah, you definitely have to respect other people's.
What's the most money you've spent on one, like entrepreneurship or mentorship or something?
Last year I spent £35,000 on one mentor for a year. Yeah.
Oh, for a year? Okay.
Yeah, so I was working with him every month. I had probably a few calls a month and sort of full access to him, but worth every penny. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
What did you learn?
I'll say, maybe he's not allowed to know his fees. A young entrepreneur in his early 30s, he sold a business for $400 million, super successful. But now he runs a company which is also doing tens of £1 million profit, his second business, and he's behind another sportswear brand, which is also, I've probably just given away who he is. He's also, so he's the sharpest. I listen to him on a lot of podcasts, but he's the sharpest thinker I've ever worked with. And he's taught me a huge amount in all aspects of business. But no, like, well worth it. I think all these things, the money hasn't gone. You just take it. It's just transferred into a different form, which is knowledge. Like, money is finite. So I totally respect money and stuff, but I don't spend money going on doing crazy things. I love spending it on trying to learn. Learning is a real enjoyment and hobby of mine.
I don't actually have that sort of sums of money to invest into it, but I probably...
Well, it's a business. I treat it as a business expense.
It is a business expense. And you can expense it for your business.
I say this to people all the time, but what I do is say, if I respect another great person, someone I can mention, I've done a lot of work with a guy called Davey Fogarty, who's big in e-commerce. He ran the OD. He's done £1 billion in e-commerce sales in his time. Super, super sharp guy, incredible entrepreneur. But if I used to work with him every quarter, say, and I would just go like, this is my plan. This is the business. Have an hour call. List out everything which is going on in the business. List out the team. List out the org chart. This is my plan. This is what I'm going to go do. Like, now you have all the context. What would you do? And he'll just go, right, I'll do this, I'll do that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't hire that person. Let me intro you to this person. They'll be amazing to do this, do that. Like, off you go. So it's easy I just ask people, like, I always start the call with like, I've got super thick skin. Please don't sugarcoat it. Just say it exactly how it is. But I'm paying for your advice. I'm paying for your time because I want your opinion. I don't want it to be what you want me to hear. I probably should act upon it based on where they are. So I normally just do what they say.
Even we can use the example of the £35,000 or dollars, whatever it was that you spent. That is a cheap CEO.
Yeah.
Almost like a fractional CEO where you can go, look, I've got these problems. I want to just talk to you about them. This is how we're thinking about business right now. Yeah,
and I think so many entrepreneurs give away equity in business without actually thinking, okay, what are they providing? What is that? What could that equity be worth? And could I just pay for that? That's, again, like you've come to the same conclusion as me, that often you don't probably need to, I've met with people who want equity for what feels like nothing in return of, okay, well, I can bring this to the table, I can bring this introduction, I can do this and can do that. It's like, well, what is that actually worth? And I always think that, if you're only going to make an introduction based on you having equity, then you're not that good of a bloke, are you? Like, you know what I mean? Unless if it's like at the size we are, it's like, oh yeah, Selfridge is great. Like, it's not going to change the business.
How do you feel about the UK right now in terms of young people growing businesses? A lot of the people that listen to this, there's a very, very large entrepreneurial cohort, particularly in startups.
I try to think of things like super holistically. And I think that especially like with what I'm trying to do with the business, or when you're trying to start a business or any sort of vehicle, I try to view it as like three main things that you need, and in different forms or stages of your business and equally different stages of life, your proportions are different, but effectively energy, time and money. I think that if you try and look at if you look at the UK holistically, energy, I don't feel like we've built this, like when you go to, the US, or when you look at other, the Middle East at the moment, where there's just a huge amount of energy towards entrepreneurship, where it feels like, they're talking about it, people feel like they're giving it. Like, entrepreneurship is super difficult, and you have to, but when you start your career, you've got energy and time and you haven't got money. But I don't feel like, I feel like it's my responsibility in my company, and I think everyone feels like that, if you are a leader, to create that. What is the environment? What is the standard which we operate by? Like, someone can't walk into my office every single day with their head low, waddling in and bringing down the energy in the room. I just won't accept it. Like, you can be sad and miserable and sit on the sofa. People have bad days, I get that, but that can't be your default state. And I think that we don't do, or the UK isn't doing enough. And I'm not saying this just needs to come from the government or whoever, but I think we need to create an environment where people feel that they can take on risk, that they can really try push the boundaries and try build these businesses. Because it's like, you just need to look at if anyone has some sort of level of like financial intelligence can look at, right, wealth is built through these big businesses, which, if you look at the Fortune 500, a lot of these businesses are relatively new. We're going to see this even more in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, that there's going to be massive disruptors. And I'm not sure the UK is doing what they can to build an environment for those businesses to really go thrive. It's more difficult than ever to build in what I would consider a real breakthrough business.
Do you think that's from a government? Is it cultural? Is it tax?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of all. I think it's definitely difficult to sort of like pinpoint the government and say you're responsible for the culture of the country. But I think there's definitely, they should act as if they are. And I think you should try push entrepreneurialism. I think you should try encourage people to take those risks, to try give them the opportunity to take those risks, because ultimately, we've talked about it at the beginning, but you need failures and you need to be supported and you need to go through those things. If people don't feel like they can be supported, that they can take risks, that, they don't just have to go into a job, they're going to just swing the other way. So I think you have to try create an environment where people feel like they can, I always say it like to live. We haven't got kids, but I think for whatever reason, it must have been brought up, I've got a huge amount of self-belief. And I think not many people have that. I think a huge part of my success is I just feel like, well, I've met him, he's not that smart and he's done it, so why can't I? But I don't think we have a huge amount of that. I think if people sort of, the biggest thing I see across the UK is people don't back themselves enough, and they don't understand how far they can. I see more potential in 99% of people than what they see in themselves, and I don't think that's right. I think you should be your own biggest super fan. You should be your own biggest supporter. So I think that definitely it's hard to do. It's not a matter of years before things like that are done. But I think it's trying to build the environment where you're telling people like, you can go do this. You can. It's not just a cookie cutter approach.
See, what you're saying there is, so I'm someone who's got a huge amount of self-belief, but I'm also very self-critical. And I think that there's like a real balance I need to strike in my life, for example, where the reason why the podcast looks as professional as it does from day one as well is because I have very, very high standards and I'm very self-critical. So if there's something, I was chatting to my editor and he's going to be listening to this when he's doing this, but I was like, mate, that's not how I want it done. I don't want AI like noise reduction in the background, for example. I want it to sound natural. Like that's the standard I've got for myself. But at the same time, like it was actually fine. It was good enough. But I'm like, to me, good enough isn't enough. It needs to be perfect. But that, I think, is a trait for someone who's got an entrepreneurial spirit, is something that holds you back, because sometimes you just have to go and do it, and waiting or procrastinating on it to try and get it perfect is probably slowing you down.
Agree.
But so whilst I'm very ambitious and I've got a lot of self-belief, I'm also incredibly self-critical.
It's actually a value within our business. We've got 4 values. It's one of them, and it's progress over perfection. And I think, progress can come in many different forms. But even if you look at D Louise's first photo shoot, it was horrendous. I looked at it at the time, I thought it was horrendous. Let's just get the first one out of the way. We didn't have big budgets, and let's go. But as long as you might not need to improve, in your instance, maybe every single episode, but it might need to improve every quarter, every 6 months, every year. And then I think it's often just a game of, well, what is the constraint of the business? And then probably, I don't know, maybe it's volume, or just trying to understand that, is the perfectionism worth it for the outcome? I think if you're in the restaurant business, it probably is, because you need that food critic to come in and you need to win your Michelin star. But maybe for yourself, it's not. Is the noise in the background, which no one even notices.
What do you think is your biggest differentiator between most people when it comes to business or even life, like just navigating life?
I'm a very deep thinker, which again, like you said, things which can hold you back, it definitely can hold me back at times. But I think of things on the surface level, but I'm massively I love learning, and I love learning about all different warps of life. I think it just so happens that business is my current vehicle of where I put my energy in, but I don't view financial success as the only sort of success. And I think that, the obvious thing to do would be, say, if I carry on building D Louise, is to stay within the jewelry industry, to really try to build up a business. But I think for me, I would love to learn, I meet some guy who owns a chain of vets and he's making a huge amount of money and he's built an incredible business model. I find that massively interesting. So I think I'd love to spend my time learning at different vehicles, just because of the pure, financially it's probably best not to do that. And I get that, but more just out of the love of the game. I love learning about new different vehicles and understanding it.
Do you also look at things and you go, I could do that?
Yeah, I think it's, again, a lesson I've learned in business is I have someone we work with is, inventory buying is a really important part of our business, making sure you've got the right inventory in the right place. If you have too much cash tied up in inventory, then you might make a profit, but you haven't got money in the bank. So we have people who do that, or we have someone who does that in the business. But my obsession at the minute is, how can I do this with Claude on for 2 hours? How can I do this on 2 hours a day? And I think I could easily get there, but I think it's knowing that right, actually, what should I focus on? Because I have this of course I can do that. And then I'll end up doing it and going down a bit rabbit hole and whatever. So it's good to have that, but knowing that you'd probably need to build the team and the infrastructure, as opposed to just I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, because eventually you run out of time.
Do you find it addicting?
Yeah. It's all I've gone through really journeys of life, especially in the last few years, where I would wake up in the night and my only thought would ever be about business and about the business. And I'd wake up and I'd be like, can I not just, normal people, what do they think about their dog or what they're doing the weekend? My brain didn't work like that. So I've definitely tried to balance my life probably in more ways, because if I just, still now I'm probably learning about AI, just on how I can use it in my business. From the minute I go to bed until 4:30, if I wake up early, I'm on Twitter learning about. Google have just released their one yesterday, which is now about imagery. So I'll learn all about that today. So yeah, it's massively addictive.
If you woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, or you couldn't get to sleep because you were thinking about business and you were trying to find ways to get your brain to switch off about that, have you found anything that's actually worked?
Meditation is something which I practice daily, and that's been a real benefit for me. One thing I try think about, which was actually, there's an entrepreneur called Brad Jacobs. He's written a book called How to Make a Few $1 billion. But
we read the same books.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Great
although,
book.
Although I was reading it to like understand how to make a few $1 billion, and it was like all about like more like mindfulness and about
But he talked about it effectively, where you try throughout your meditation, where you try think of things in extremes. So you might play life forward, and then I even often think like, right, put it into a chat GPT of like, based on everything you know about me, or Claude, whatever you use, and say, based on everything you know about me, what my life be like a day-to-day life be like 100 years ago. And you learn like, okay, well, I would be doing a manual labor job. I would like, there wasn't proper sewage. There weren't, like if you got sick, you'd probably end up dying. Like I'm quite sensitive and soft. So I would have some sort of illness with no antibiotic. You build that form of like gratitude. So I find things like that help me switch out of, even Brad Jacobs talks about it, that you just try zoom out. I think the world, you literally this speck of dust. Like, does it really matter? Like, no, you end up just, you're on a little bit of a hamster wheel. As long as you're aware of that, I think if you build awareness to that, it makes everything a lot easier.
Does that also help you when you're walking into rooms, for example, like when someone might have imposter syndrome, but you can go in there and you can ask the questions, which again, I've grown up in sort of a professional environment where you put people on pedestals quite a lot. It's like, oh, they're further down the career ladder than me. This person's coming in to present to us. They must be the oracle and know all the information, but they're just a human at the end of the day. Yeah. They're just packaged up differently.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Like a reflection lesson I had last year, as I met with two people who were both heavily involved in UK-based, fast-growing jewellery brands. Different brands, but both of them are massively well-known. I met with both of them 1 week apart, just to, how could I learn from them, or had got mutually connected. They both gave me polar opposites of advice in terms of what our channel strategy should be, on how we should try to grow the brand. Should we go up market or down market? Totally different things. And it's not that neither of them was right or wrong. It's just that people have different opinions. And, if like, I remember after Steve got more involved with the business, I was like, right, cool. So what's the secret then? like, how do we get this to $1 billion quid? And there's no answer. Like every case is nuanced. It depends on, what type of founder you are, what type of person you are. It depends on what you actually want. So yeah, definitely don't put people on pedestals in that sense. But yeah, it helps just understand like what we're trying to do is we're trying to do amazing things. A good tip for an interview, which was taught to me late last year, is we had a stressful thing going on work, someone trying to sue us for some money, a good amount of money, so enough for it to be like, and it was keeping me up a lot. First of all, I like, when you zoom out, like you become more fearless. You're like, is it going to bankrupt the business? No, whatever. But labeling those things as, so this is, as an example, if you're being sued by a company in Spain, if you talk to other people, you'd be like, oh, mate, everything's shit. We're being sued by a Spanish company. So that word sued puts you in a negative state, and that you run that around your head. If you label that as Project Spain, so if you call that like, boom, Project Spain, we're going head to head, like, let's go, guys, we're ready. It just, the words you use make things feel a lot better. You are being sued by a Spanish company, but it feels a lot healthier in terms of you're not using this like these negative words which are going to bring down morale, and it sounds like you've done something really wrong. We haven't done anything wrong, and it's looking like what we were going through, all those sort of not sleepless nights I had, but the tough mental battle I was going through, was all for nothing. But labeling it just in that way and using the word you use can definitely help.
We do this a lot now with like mental disorders as well, right? Like I feel like anxiety, which is like, I'm feeling a bit stressed. It's like this thing which you make it into a much bigger thing. I've got anxiety. I need to get some medication, or like everyone's now got ADHD, for example, which, you know, I can't focus. Well, fucking no one can.
I've got a friend who's got ADHD, and he's an incredible person, incredible entrepreneur. But if you met him versus someone who actually claims they have, like, you haven't, like, do you know what I mean? Like, maybe on some spectrum. But yeah, he's someone who's uses it to his strength. He pushes him forward. He's not just labeling himself. He's not viewing it in that way. And I think a lot of people they can just get in your own head a little bit too much.
What's your favorite book you've read?
It's the book which, again, another value in the business, and a book I gave to Liv as soon as we started and gifted it to tons of people, is The Magic of Thinking Big. It's a real simple read. But I think on that thing of belief and knowing what's possible, that's a book which was sort of relatively like life-changing for me. I definitely think that often you can tell someone's success in business isn't necessarily about how good they are, but just how big they think. So that's a book which changed my life.
Really? I've actually not heard of that book, so I'm going to make a note to read it.
It's like a real basic, like, you know, one of the first self-help sort of one of them. I think if anyone who's really into business, The Executive Within, I think it's by Peter Drucker, who's like sort of a real old school business management theorist, is a really good book as well.
How do you actually measure success?
For myself, I think going on this weird, not weird, but interesting journey, I think at a relatively young age where it goes into where contribution starts becoming more important, when you go, like, fortunately, like, I don't have desires to live some sort of massively lavish, super expensive life. I definitely like the finer things, but, you know, beyond a point, my happiest place is, like, I love going out for breakfast. I'd probably go out for breakfast 4 days a week and speak to the lady and have the same breakfast. Like, that's probably where I'm at one of my happiest parts of the day. So I don't get massive satisfaction from, like, having like huge lavish lifestyles or anything like that. I think as I sort of transition, it definitely will be into contribution. I think, that being said, I love the idea of trying to build a really big business. I think that would just be a lot of fun, and I think business is a great vehicle for personal development. I think it forces you outside of your comfort zone constantly. It forces you to learn. So I think I sort of treat it in that way. But, you know, whether I build a business worth £50 million, £100 million, £200 million, you know, it doesn't really make a massive difference to me.
Are you building a lifestyle business or a business to sell?
I think in today's market, they're similar things. I think that often, again, if I was an investor, what would I look for? I'd look for a business which is consistently growing. I'd want a business where there is free cash flow. And I think that necessarily isn't built off, you know, if you plucked the founders out, if you plucked out one or two key people, would still continue to grow. I think that's the ultimate lifestyle business would be that, is that something which can run without you. It produces a huge amount of free cash flow. It's a great business to own. I think this, at least in our category, I think it's different to build something for equity. I think, you know, I'm in the sense that, you know, you go do a Series A, you do a Series B, and you hit some rocket growth. Like, unless if you were innovating massively and you were doing, you know, technology and jewellery is something massive. Aura Ring have done it. There's people who are doing some really cool stuff with necklaces for women. But I think for us, it's more about that sort of real consistent growth. My favorite jewelry business, which no one talks about, there's a jewelry business called Warren James. They're a physical retail store. But you can go on Company's House. You know, I take anyone we hire in the business. We hire someone in marketing who's come from a really pretty D2C firm, and I take them to Warren James, and they go, "What the hell is this shop?" It's in Wandsworth Shopping Centre near our offices, and they produce like £40 million of EBITDA every single year. And do £100 million turnover. So they have 40% operating margins. Started in 1979 and have got more money in the bank than
Warren James is where I'd, like, my mum for like Mother's Day or something, I'd go to Warren James to get like a little necklace that had mum written on it and stuff like that. Yeah.
No, it's a brother and sister who built the business.
What, really?
Yeah, from the ground up, no investors.
No investors. Yeah. And now, is it still a family-owned business?
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so is that aspirational for you?
Yeah, that's like it for me, that, you know, we're on this sort of like sexy Instagram business hype because it felt like the right channel to try to grow the business, but that's the real, you know, they're the real winners.
So when you're in Wandsworth Shopping Centre, that's when you've really made it.
yeah, exactly. I think that's what I That's what I think is like really admirable. I think what they've built is incredible.
You know, to find somebody these days who has built a business that does 40 million a year EBITDA, and you don't know who the founder is and you don't know what they look like and you just can't get hold of them. That's
tricky.
That's magical.
Yeah,
but like,
No,
because they're having the best life out there. They're just living their dream right now.
No, exactly.
Every entrepreneur must be living with this risk that this business in the future will be worth zero. And what I do in the meantime, do I need to make hay while the sun shines and those sorts of things? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I've been bad at doing this. In honesty, I sort of had this mindset up until I'm 29 now, where, you know, as long as I've got enough money to live my lifestyle comfortably, you know, all that silly like 6 months burn, all this, like, you know, I'm used to just going like I always have a huge amount of my net worth is tied up in the business, and that's because that's seen the best return for myself up until this point. But I definitely think I haven't again, if I was going to try relive a few years, like across my businesses I've had in my time, I've turned over a huge amount of money. Have I put as much of that money in my pocket as what I would like? Probably not, but it wasn't the priority. So what would I do with it? You know, buy a home or put it in the S&P or something like that doesn't excite me as much as really trying to. It probably would have stalled the business's growth up until this point. But definitely as I go into this sort of like stage of my life where you start thinking about, you know, where if we have a child, Liv won't want to work as much and we need that financial security, it's definitely becoming more of a priority than less.
The books that you read, the way that you approach capital allocation, you would also make a very good investor, but you're doing it inside your business, which is the reason why you've been able to scale. We talk about compounding your wealth, but you're compounding inside your business, right?
Yeah.
Like that free cash flow that you're generating, how much of that do you reinvest into the business?
Our plan was basically that we, like as I said, sort of like the Pandora's Ostrowskis, I don't think D Louise gets to where I want to get to through D2C, or I don't think we'll be a D2C first business forever. If I spoke with an investor and they said, right, you can get the business to 200 million just D2C, I think you're lying. I don't think that's the best approach. But so effectively what we've been doing is building up the cash in the business and being quite conservative about maintaining equity. So then when we want to go into physical retail, we don't need to go raise. That there will be a point, you know, if we want to go have 20, 30, 40 stores, yes, we probably do need a shit ton of capital for that process. If you want to do that fast, but more so that we can open the first, say 2, 3, 4 and continue to bootstrap that. And then in theory that if you're fit outs aren't too expensive, that you can get a good payback period and then continue going. So we've sort of been trying to build really strengthen the business, because, you know, anything can happen. I think D2C is going to be massively disrupted, already is being massively disrupted in the next few years.
Do you think people are going back into physical now? I
think physical is the right play for our business.
Is there anyone out there you can think of right now, you look at them and you go, I love a bit of your business?
It's more the category they're in, or I think they're doing something really well and disruptive. There's a few young people I know, and if they wanted to start something, I'd always put money in, and I would always want to try give advice, but I wouldn't do it to try make loads of money. Maybe that goes back to the UK not being in the right position, because maybe there is the next Uber out there and I'm leaving them alone.
Do you see yourself being in the UK long term?
Potentially. I definitely would consider moving abroad, 100%. And I think that I've always thought for the brand to build in the US that I would love to spend some time there and be involved in that economy. But I think I haven't lived abroad, and I would view the UK, you know, the world is a small place, and we go off to meet our manufacturers who are all across the world. And you know, it's only a short flight, or a relatively amount of hours there are in a year. So I think I definitely don't want to sort of feel fixed to one area.
The UK punches well above its weight in relative terms, because we're a really small little island. The world is massive. So like if you've got the mindset which is I want to be here and I want to build here, you're literally giving up opportunity elsewhere.
100%. I think there's if anyone does want to start a business, I think there's a huge opportunity for people being more on the ground. British, American, Australian people being on the ground in Hong Kong or in China, where a huge amount of production happens. That I think every brand has gone on this huge growth curve where, 2021 and the years following that, it was growth. If you had a marketing agency, you were making a lot of money. I think now everyone's getting to the point where growth is definitely more challenging, and it's how can we be more efficient? So how can we be more efficient in our supply chain, in our packaging and our overheads? And I think that there's a huge opportunity for people to try be that middle ground in whether that's negotiating with your suppliers in local language and doing those things. That I think that'd be a great business to set up for someone.
Final question. This is quite a selfish question. Are there any podcasts that you've listened to that you would really recommend?
Yeah, the Founders podcast.
Oh yeah, okay.
I've been listening to that honestly since he started.
Deep dives. Oh, actually, they are so long though, aren't they?
Yeah, they
the
are.
Rolex one's brilliant.
Yeah. I've listened. I've done all of them. I think they're amazing, and that goes back into your point about feeling like people outside of this room is like you just need to. A lot of these people's journeys are, Sam Walton, founder of Walmart. Walmart, I think it came out the other day. The turnover is still £700 billion a year, $1 billion. Sorry. He just his first store took him 5 years to build, and then he ended up losing that store because the landlord retook over their lease because he didn't check his lease agreement. So he's made this relatively silly mistake, but he's still at this point, I don't know, 30s before he really scaled up Walmart and built it into what it is today. So I think it's just you learn that these people, they're not always, there are the odd genius out there, and there are this sort of these people who make everything look easy. But if you listen to someone's similar to the book Shoe Dog, which probably everyone's read, but it's like a fucking difficult, challenging journey which these people have been on. It's definitely not just an overnight success.
What's the most costly mistake you've made?
I think that it took me too long to learn to go all in on one thing, and I'm a big fan of the burn the boat strategy. So that's where I'd love to be in the position with anything I go on do that it's almost like this has to work. Like I won't really, failure is an option, but I'm going to go all in. I think sometimes you can end up being, particularly as you get older, a bit too conservative. When I went all in on D Louise, I'd made sure that I was in a position where I didn't have anything to fall back on.
Interesting, really.
Sort of deliberately, yeah.
So you literally go, this has to work.
Yeah, I had another business which was making some good money, and I effectively sold it to an employee at far less than probably it was worth. I could have continued running it sort of in the background because I knew that I wanted to be in the position where it was like, I need to make this work.
But you didn't want that safety net?
No, definitely not.
Fucking respect that. It's an amazing business that you've built, and you can just tell from the way that you think, the way your brain's working, that you're going to go on and build. Probably, if this one isn't a £100 million business, then you'll do it.
Figure a way there.
You'll figure a way there. I love this conversation. Thank you,
mate. Thank you.